Welcome everyone to the Friday edition of our Packers News live chat alongside Jim Owczarski. I am Olivia Reiner. We are less than 48 hours away from the Packers' Sunday matchup against the Jacksonville Jaguars. We'll have a little discussion about the injury report in just a moment. However, before we begin, as always, you can be a part of our conversation. If you're over on Facebook, Periscope, or YouTube, leave us a question down in the chat. Jim and I want to hear from you. We'll get to some of your thoughts toward the end of our conversation today. This Jaguars scoring offense is no good. They're 26th in the league. However, they do have a deep threat in wide receiver DJ Chark. This past Sunday against the Houston Texans, Chark had a 73-yard touchdown reception. It was the longest in the NFL since 2018. Typically, this would be a responsibility for cornerbacks Kevin King or Jaire Alexander. However, both of them are dealing with their own injuries. Alexander has a concussion, and King has been out for the last several games with a quad injury. Alexander is listed as doubtful heading into this Sunday. King is questionable. If neither of them are healthy enough to go, who covers Chark?
Yeah, I think in this instance, Olivia, we're talking about Josh Jackson and Kadar Holman. And then a little bit of Chandon Sullivan. If they're in base defense, I think Sullivan's going to kick outside. If they go to sub packages, I think Sullivan moves back into the slot position. None of those guys, I think, are going to travel with DJ Chark. I think it's wherever he lines up. It's whatever half of the field, Holman, Sullivan, Jackson are. And I'm sure they'll pay DJ Chark his deep respect. Much like the Packers have done, honestly, with a lot of players. Darnell Savage playing way back, Adrian Amos. I think it's a combination of things there. I don't think any one guy, Olivia, is going to draw that assignment.
Josh Jackson was targeted the most times he's been targeted in his last 4 starts this past week against the 49ers, 10 times. However, he had his lowest completion percentage in those 4 starts, only 60%. I'm not saying Josh Jackson is the truth, the answer to all of their needs at cornerback. He's been having some issues with penalties. He has 4 pass interference calls over the last, in 2020 just as a whole. However, Kevin King does become a free agent in 2021. What would Jackson have to do over these next few games to prove that he's worthy of taking King's spot on the roster next season?
Well, I hesitate to say what he has to do. I think it's more of what Kevin King hasn't done. I think when this year started, Olivia, the thought was if Kevin King can play 14 to 16 games in the regular season and the postseason, the Packers probably would try to make some effort to extend him. He'd probably play his way into a pretty high dollar deal. At this juncture, Kevin King's got one healthy year. If he finishes the year strong, let's say I don't think he's going to play Sunday. We can get into that. But let's just say he finishes out the year playing 7 strong games, a 3-game postseason. I don't know if that's enough for Brian Gutekunst and Russ Ball to say, you know what, let's give this guy a 4-year deal at a lot of money. Whereas Josh Jackson, he is under contract. He is on a rookie deal, and he has been healthy. So I think it's more of a combination of what Kevin King hasn't been able to do here in 2020. And if Josh Jackson can show just a little bit more growth, maybe cut down on some of those penalties, the Packers can go in saying, okay, maybe we draft a corner to compete. Or maybe there's a veteran, that you can sign that can maybe compete as well. And you just say, let's throw them all in the bucket and compete because you have Jaire Alexander and you have Chandon Sullivan, and you just see what happens over on the other side.
Let's flip it over to one of the Jaguars' offensive gems, and they found one in undrafted free agent running back James Robinson this past year. He is 6th in the league right now with 580 rushing yards. He's 2nd among all rookies. The Packers' run defense, on the other hand, is coming off of one of its best games of the season against the 49ers. They limited them to 55 yards. Granted, the 49ers were essentially a JV offense. However, how prepared are the Packers' defense to go up against potentially a hot running back?
Yeah, this is the one interesting part of this game to me, Olivia, because Jacksonville is so overmatched in a lot of ways. And it does remind me a little bit of the 49ers in that if Jay Gruden, Jacksonville's offensive coordinator, is worth his salt, and I think he is, they're going to hand it to James Robinson 20-plus times. They've done it the last 2 weeks or last 2 Jacksonville games. Last week against Houston with Josh Luton as their starter. They did it before the bye when Gardner Minshew tore some ligaments and broke some bones in his hand. This is really the only way that I think Jacksonville can shorten the game and make it interesting, is if James Robinson is given the ball 20-plus times and takes a little bit of pressure off of Luton. Look, Jacksonville has an intact offensive line. Andrew Norwell is a real guard. Cam Robinson has a history. I mean, he's at least got some pedigree at tackle. Their center, Lindner, is a good center. And they've played all 5 games, together. So, yeah, Robinson's on track for a 1,000-yard season, double-digit touchdowns. That's not something to sneeze at. An undrafted kid out of Illinois State in the far west side of western part of Illinois. So Dean Lowry might be a little familiar with him coming through the Rockford area. So, yeah, I think, Olivia, he's worth paying attention to. And if they give it to him a lot early, maybe that shortens the game and at least makes the Packers defense have to maybe not totally pin their ears back on a rookie quarterback.
We've discussed Kevin King and Jair Alexander's injuries. Let's take a look at the full injury report heading into Sunday's game for the Packers. Questionable, like I said, Kevin King is up there. Will Redmond, safety Vernon Scott, wide receiver Darius Shepard, wide receiver Equinemius St. Brown, tight end Robert Tonyan, and tackle Rick Wagner, all questionable. Doubtful is Jair Alexander, and out is tight end John Lovett, who is on his way to injured reserve after tearing his ACL in practice on Thursday. Brutal injury for Lovett. But anyway, you take a look at this list, and there's a certain name that perhaps you may recognize that's not on it for the first time in a very long time, which is left tackle David Bakhtiari. He has been on there with a chest injury for the last 3 weeks. He's missed the last 3 games, and finally, no injury designation. He is able to play. How important is it that the Packers get their left tackle back against a team that is pretty good at getting after the quarterback?
Yeah, I mean, it's just the fact that, again, he's an all-pro. One of the best left tackles in football. So they are a better team when he plays. Billy Turner has been very good at moving from right to left, back to right. So the fact that the Packers are going into this game with their offensive line, essentially intact since week 1. I mean, Elton Jenkins can stay at left guard. Lucas Patrick is at right guard. That's going to set them up for success, you would think, in the run game, especially now Aaron Jones is back. He's not going to be on a pitch counter limited like he was against San Francisco. Jamal Williams is back off the reserve COVID list. He's had a week off that he didn't anticipate. So, yeah, Olivia, I think this bodes very, very well for the Packers offense on Sunday.
Speaking of full health, let's take some questions over here on Facebook, Periscope, and YouTube. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll start with Nick here. Nick says it might be a good time for the Packers to decide to rest wide receiver Allen Lazard and left tackle David Bakhtiari for the Colts game, which is not this upcoming weekend, but next weekend. They looked really good last night. The Colts played the Tennessee Titans last night and won Thursday Night Football. Let's stick with Lazard because we did just speak about David Bakhtiari. It looks like he will be good to go, and for all we know, he will be active in this game on Sunday. However, Allen Lazard and inside linebacker Christian Kirksey are still on injured reserve. Head coach Matt LaFleur called Lazard questionable, and he said that Kirksey would be a game-time decision, even though neither of them are able to be on the injury report. So make of that what you will. However, the Packers have up until tomorrow to take them off of injured reserve and make them eligible for the game on Sunday. How likely is it that they decide to do so?
Yeah, I think for these guys, again, this goes back to how they've handled injuries to date. And that is with the long view. They're 6-2, right? I mean, so they should be able to beat Jacksonville without Allen Lazard and Christian Kirksey. Perhaps it's a depth issue at receiver, but again, Allen Lazard coming back from this core muscle, he did not practice Friday. It's the first time he's really missed some time. There's some soreness there. If you're going to activate him, you might as well play him. So why put that pressure on yourself if you're Matt LaFleur, if you're the medical staff? Christian Kirksey and Allen Lazard don't have to come off IR until next week, Olivia. I don't see why you would do that. Christian Kirksey with the pectoral injury. Inside linebacker, they've been banged up. Chris Barnes remains on the reserve COVID list. I guess technically he can come off that tomorrow. Saturdays for all we know. But would he be ready to play after not practicing for a week and a half? So Kirksey, I could see being active and playing, kind of being eased in a little bit, whereas Lazard, I could see them giving it another week. Then again, you have to allow for, if they're ready, as Matt LaFleur said, I've gotten a lot of blowback on Twitter. If they're available to play, they will play. It's just one of those things that they're close enough where I could see them waiting for the weekend, but I could see them saying, hey, it's Jacksonville, give it another 3-4 days because they plan on playing into February.
We will let you know as soon as we know on Saturday whether or not the Packers decide to activate Lazard or Kirksey. Make sure you're following us on all of our social media platforms, checking out PackersNews.com as always. Thank you, Nick, for your question. Jaron over on Facebook. Good to see you, Jaron. Jaron wants to know, will all three running backs play in the game on Sunday? By all three, Jaron means Aaron Jones, Jamal Williams, and running back A.J. Dillon. Dillon is still on COVID-19 reserve. There has been no indication that he is coming off, at least anytime soon, so the Packers will roll with Jones and Williams. The Packers did sign a running back to the practice squad in Mike Weber this week. How likely is it that the Packers decide to bring him up just to have some backup at the position?
Yeah, I think that could happen. There's so many roster machinations they could do right here. So they can pull up two players off the practice squad as reserve COVID replacements. So they can do that, and they can bring up two practice squad players just because. So there's a part of me that thinks Weber can get called up, even though he's only been in practice for a few days. Just for that instance alone, I think Tyler Ervin will get carries as the third running back, although less so because Williams and Jones have been so durable. But I could see Weber coming up as a just-in-case scenario. Or even Dominique Daphne, with John Lovett's injury. Daphne, he's a rookie, but he's at least been in the offense for, a month and a half at this point, Olivia. So that I could see as well. But, yeah, I expect, Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams to get the carries with maybe a little Tyler Ervin sprinkled in.
Thanks, Jaron, for your question. And we'll actually take another one of your questions, too. Jaron asks, who is starting at middle linebacker? All these wonderful questions about the roster that none of the coaches will ever answer. So we will do our best to answer for you today. So middle linebacker, the options right now presently are inside linebacker Kamal Martin, who recently came off of COVID-19 reserve as he was a close contact of running back A.J. Dillon's. He is off. He's ready to go. However, inside linebackers Christian Kirksey, he is still on injured reserve, and Chris Barnes is still on COVID-19 reserve. So likely to start Kamal Martin. Who is the other starter?
Yeah, I mean, right now, let's look at the roster as it is, and it's Kamal Martin, it's Ty Summers. Those are the two guys. Oren Burks is an outside linebacker right now. You saw him play at the end of the game against San Francisco, frankly, because they just ran out of bodies. James Burgess, he's on the roster. I don't know if he's in a position to start and call the plays. So to me, it's Ty Summers, maybe with the green dot. Maybe they give it to Kamal Martin too, and they can swap out at times. It's a good question, Jaron. Will Redmond is back. Raven Green is back. So I can also see, Mike Pettin bringing in those, the hybrid safety guys. But again, we started this chat, Olivia, with talking about James Robinson and the Jacksonville Jaguars maybe wanting to run the ball, maybe keep Mike Pettin in that base defense. So, yeah, I think let's go with Martin and Summers, Burgess, and maybe Dejon Harris coming up from practice squad to kind of buffer that up a little bit.
Thanks, Jaron, for your great questions, as always. Andy over on Facebook has a question that relates to the first question that we took today. Andy says, looking ahead, the Indianapolis Colts defense looks very good. Perhaps the Packers ought to be ultra cautious with their players, especially if they're injured players, looking ahead to next week. Thoughts? Head coach Matt LaFleur would never admit to
Andy.
looking ahead to any other team except for the team present. Got to go 1-0 this week against the Jacksonville Jaguars. However, 1-7 record, 26th ranked offense, 31st ranked defense. Is there any chance that the Packers are looking ahead to what's down the road against the Colts and saying, well, maybe we should be a little bit cautious with some of our injured players?
It's definitely not a look ahead to the Colts. Like Jair Alexander, to me, even if he can do some work Saturday and advances through the protocol, It's proven you are more likely to suffer another concussion immediately after having one. Now, granted, that was Thursday, that was 10 days ago, but he's just now advancing to the protocol where he can be outside. So he's obviously dealing with some effects there. There's no reason, even if he's cleared Saturday, Olivia, to play him at all, because he's just that's one of those where it can compound the problem with another concussion. So there's no reason to play him. Kevin King, again, I think you want him on the field. If he can go, he probably should play. I don't, but again, this goes to the soft tissue injuries that they've had in the past, and they've had it with Kevin King, right, Olivia? I mean, he was on track a couple weeks ago to play. He suffered a setback on Friday, and then was down for 2 more weeks. So I don't think it's not playing to look ahead to Indianapolis. I think it's not playing to look ahead to a Super Bowl run. And that's how they think. And if they've got Kevin King, Jair Alexander, Alan Lazard, Christian Kirksey all coming back going into Indy, it's not because it's Indy. It's because they're finally able to play that week and finish out the season strong.
Thank you, Andy, for your question. We appreciate it. Southwest Florida Packers fan club. Hopefully it's nice and warm down there. It's certainly not up here. Yeah, right. They ask, tight end halfback position concerns them. Yes, it does. Certainly. That was Josiah DeGuara's position earlier this season. However, after just a handful of games this season, he tore his ACL. Then tight end / halfback John Lovett tears his ACL in practice. Now, who fills that role?
Yeah, it's, we talked about it with DeGuara. We're like, okay, Jay Sternberger, it's time. And it didn't really happen. I mean, we've seen him. He's caught like a pass for a yard the last couple weeks. Lovett played 8.5% of the total snaps at this point. I mean, just like Danny Vitale a year ago, Olivia, yes, fullback matters in this offense, but clearly they have not found the guy to play fullback. I mean, it is a multiple tight end offense. So with no Lovett, Mercedes Lewis isn't playing special teams. Robert Tonyan would play special teams, but he's clearly banged up. Sternberger is playing special teams. I could see, a Dax Raymond being brought up. We mentioned Dominique Daphne, the tight end / fullback on the practice squad. I could see him getting called up to get some work. They like having 4 tight ends. Is that a concern? I think so, because they want some depth at that position. But really, it's where's Jay Sternberger at? Where's the confidence level? What can he do? All of the things that they want him to do. We've been talking about it. We haven't seen it. So maybe Sunday's another opportunity.
Thank you, Southwest Florida Packers fan club. Speaking of Mercedes Lewis and the tight ends, Bernard over on Facebook wants to know, why is tight end Mercedes Lewis only used as a primary blocker? He's 6'8". He is well known as one of the best blocking tight ends historically, at least in recent history in the NFL. However, quarterback Aaron Rodgers has said, even this past week, he would like to see Mercedes Lewis used a little bit more in the red zone. How likely is it that we see Mercedes Lewis on the receiving end of a couple more passes, especially against his old team, the Jacksonville Jaguars?
Yeah, they may want to get him one. Like last week he said, he told our Tom Silverstein that touchdown he had was drawn up for him in the red zone. Generally, if he's targeted, it feels like he's the last guy in the progression. Rodgers is kind of running around and he just, he sees 89 out there. I mean, he's a traditional, what they call Y tight end in this offense, Bernard. Online, inline, however you want to say that. And he's a blocker. That's what he is. I mean, maybe in a previous life, 10 years ago, there was more to his legs than that. Clearly he can still get out, run a little bit. We saw the play in New Orleans, where he did run a pattern. Look, he is what he is. He is a block-first tight end who has decent enough hands to make a catch. I think it was the Tampa Bay game, Olivia, where he was wide open up the seam and Rodgers missed him by a few yards. Now, what is that? Is that because if that's Robert Tonyan and he can actually run a little faster? I don't know. It's just one of those, I think, where he is what he is. They like him with what he does. He likes that role. But yeah, in terms of this Sunday, I would not start him in fantasy football, but I could definitely see him getting a first down or maybe a touchdown against his old team.
There's the final word from our fantasy football expert, Jim Owczarski. As always, we appreciate your insight, Jim, and we appreciate all of your questions. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. We will be back live pregame 90 minutes before the Jaguars-Packers matchup on Sunday, so make sure you come back here. Hang with us, ask your questions. We'll also be live after the game to wrap up the game and everything else. For Jim, I am Olivia. We will see you next time.
See you.